where my heart goes.
Alright, and so in today's video for Core 2 PDHPE, we're looking at the physiological adaptations in response to training. So in your syllabus on the left-hand side, it says that there are 6 physiological adaptations you need to know, which are resting heart rate, stroke volume and cardiac output, oxygen uptake and lung capacity, hemoglobin levels, muscle hypertrophy, and the effect on fast and slow twitch muscle fibers. On the right-hand side of the syllabus, with this information, you then need to examine the relationship between the principles of training, the physiological adaptations, and improved performance. So it ties directly into the previous dot point, which is generally where they pull your questions from in the HSC. So before I get started, the first thing I want to say about this dot point is that you need to understand that physiological adaptations are things that occur after training. They're generally the reason why people train in the first place, okay? Athletes will train, they will cause damage in their body with the goal of then recovering and coming back stronger or faster, which is the physiological adaptation in response to the training, okay? So they're not happening, this stuff doesn't happen during training. You need to understand that it is something that happens afterwards. And now let's get started. All right, so our first one is our resting heart rate, and in a nutshell, it decreases. Why? So aerobic training increases the size and the contractile strength of the actual heart muscle, okay? So the heart is a muscle in your body, just like any other muscle in your body, except, well, okay, it's not like any other body because it's cardiac muscle, it's not skeletal. You don't think consciously, I've got to beat my heart, I've got to beat my heart, I've got to beat my heart, I've got to beat my heart. That'd be exhausting. There'd be no time for Facebook then, right? So our heart just goes and goes and goes, okay? But when you train aerobically, because the heart is working for extended periods of time, it will actually get stronger, okay? So the walls of the heart become thicker, and the actual force that the heart is able to generate behind its double beating action is stronger. A stronger heart, therefore, has a larger stroke volume. And you're not going to understand that term too much right now, but you will in about 2 minutes' time. And therefore, so in a nutshell, stroke volume is the amount of blood that leaves your heart per beat, okay? And therefore, because it has a larger stroke volume, the heart needs to beat less times per minute at rest to provide the body with oxygenated blood. So let's say I am me and I require 4 liters of blood per minute at rest. Let's take the exact same me, except I am now an elite athlete. I am like super triathlon guy, okay? At rest though, guess how much blood I need? 4 liters a minute. It doesn't change because I'm not doing anything, okay? It's mainly based off your weight and your size, okay? So if I am the same me, whether I'm trained or untrained, but I'm still the same size and shape, I still need the same blood at rest. But because my heart is stronger, because it's been training aerobically, this on average will take about 60 beats, okay, per minute. Whereas elite athletes will have resting heart rates of, down near towards 40 or lower. That's pretty crazy. It's very, very stable and strong hearts. So that's resting heart rate. Sorry gang, one thing I actually did miss, it's an oversight because I assume that most people know, but it's my bad. So with your resting heart rate thing, the thing I didn't do is actually define what it was. Resting heart rate is the amount of beats that your heart has per minute at rest. So if I'm sitting or if I'm just standing, it's the amount of times my heart is going to beat within a 60-second time frame. All right, so the next one is stroke volume. So in a nutshell, what does our stroke volume do? It increases. Stroke volume is the blood per beat leaving your left ventricle of the heart to then go through the aorta to the rest of your body. All right. Same thing as before, aerobic training increases the size and contractile strength of the heart. A stronger heart can push more blood per contraction, which allows athletes to deliver oxygenated blood around the body more efficiently. So we go back to the example I had before, remember the 4 liters per minute at rest, whether I'm elite or not elite, all right? Now let's change it. Now let's get me, working at 75% of my maximum heart rate, okay? This is just an example just to illustrate. So the normal me let's say instead of delivering 4 liters per minute of blood around my body, because now I'm working quite hard, not too hard, but I'm working hard enough, okay? My heart is going to be able to deliver, the normal me version at 75% of my maximum heart rate can deliver 8.5 liters of blood around my body per minute, all right? Like I said, just an example, you don't need to remember these statistics. However, the elite me, the one that's been training for triathlons and I'm super fit. All right, so the elite me can actually deliver 12 liters per minute at 75% maximum heart rate, okay? So my heart rate, remember my heart rate is based off, my maximum heart rate is based off my age, so that doesn't change, okay? But the fitter me has a stronger heart and therefore I can deliver more blood, which generally means I don't have to work as hard because I'm fit. So the normal me would go for a run and then after 30, 40 minutes I'd be tanked, whereas the elite me would go for a run and after 34 minutes I'm just warming up because that's how fit I am. So that's stroke volume. All right, so our third one is cardiac output. And once again, our nutshell thing, what does cardiac output do? It goes up. Cardiac output is defined as the blood per minute leaving the left ventricle. So remember, stroke volume is per beat. Cardiac output is the total amount of per minute. So the equation that you basically work it out is that your heart rate times your stroke volume is your cardiac output, all right? So if I have a 60 beats per minute heart rate and my stroke volume, I don't know, was 100 mils, you know, that's going to be 600, my cardiac output's going to be 600. There we go, heart rate times stroke volume. If this was 60, and if this was 100 mils. All right, 60, 100, 6 liters per minute cardiac output. Excellent, there we go, math is hard. Aerobic training once again increases the size and contractile strength of the heart. I'm just repeating myself there. However, a stronger heart can push more blood per contraction, which allows athletes to deliver a greater amount of oxygen to muscles per minute, enhancing, and this is the performance link, enhancing the duration they can work aerobically before fatigue sets in, all right? Hopefully after watching those 3 dashes, you can clearly see that heart rate, stroke volume, and cardiac output all work together, okay? So when you go to talk about them in an answer in your exams or whatever, you don't need to talk independently about them. You could talk about all 3 in one paragraph because it's nice and easy to explain the phenomenon of why training aerobically improves an athlete's performance. Cool. Now we'll get on to the rest of them. All right, so our next one is oxygen uptake, and the dot point is oxygen uptake and lung capacity. So I'll talk about lung capacity a little bit separate, but it is the same dot point. In a nutshell, what does oxygen uptake do if you train or a physiological adaptation? It increases, okay? So oxygen uptake is the amount of oxygen able to enter the bloodstream via capillaries at the lungs, all right? Training aerobically increases the amount of capillaries in the lungs and skeletal muscle, therefore allowing more oxygen to be absorbed and used per breath, all right? So when you breathe in, inspiration, you take in a whole bunch of gases, including oxygen, all right? And then when it enters your lungs, it then feeds off and it enters the bloodstream. All right, so the first thing that's going to happen is we're going to increase the amount of capillaries in the lungs. So we're putting more oxygen in our bloodstream. Then all of your muscles, if they train aerobically, and we'll talk about type 1 fibers soon in a few minutes, if you train aerobically, your muscles, where they connect to your bloodstreams, they've also got capillaries, okay? Capillaries are simply where gas exchange occurs in tissue, all right? So then as all that oxygen travels along, because you've got more capillaries, your muscles are able to absorb more oxygen, and more oxygen in muscles improves aerobic performance because you know that you need your aerobic energy system to have as a constant supply of oxygen to keep working. All right, so here's my simple picture. So let's say this is your bloodstream, and they're, red blood cells, the circly things. And this is a muscle, any muscle, bicep, glute. I don't know why I said glute. Bicep, okay? These squiggly things, just for illustration purposes, doesn't actually look like this, are capillaries, okay? Capillaries is what connects your bloodstream to your muscles. So your muscle will feed carbon dioxide through the capillaries into the bloodstream, and then the bloodstream will get rid of it when you breathe out. And then the capillaries will then absorb oxygen through the capillaries into the skeletal muscle. By training aerobically, okay, and remember we're trying to train just below that anaerobic threshold, so we're trying to train it quite intensely. What we'll actually do is that we can't increase the size of the bloodstream, and training aerobically really isn't going to increase the size of the muscle at all. But what we can do is increase the amount of capillaries. Same muscle, same bloodstream, same amount of air goes into the body, but now we're actually able to absorb twice the amount of oxygen because we are training for that, or because we have adapted to the aerobic training that we've done. And therefore we are more fitter, we don't fatigue as easily, we have a more ready supply of oxygen through our performance. Yeah, that was a good explanation. I like that. All right, so the part that goes along with this dot point is lung capacity, and what you really need to understand is that at the end of the day, despite being a sedentary individual or despite being a super elite athlete, there is no significant change in your lungs capacity. If you're a smoker, that will impact your lung capacity because it's actually damaging your lungs. But that aside, because we're not talking about smokers, we're talking about performance and athletes. So how does your lungs adapt to aerobic training? They don't. They pretty much stay exactly as they are. Like there is a very, very, very minute increase in size from your lungs working, but it is so insignificant that it is not important. And therefore, if you ever asked a question on lung capacity, how does it change? It doesn't. That's the answer. What does change, as I just said, is that you are able to uptake more oxygen due to the capillary changes within your lungs and within your skeletal muscle. But the size of your lungs, so the amount of breath the amount of air that you breathe in, and the amount of air you breathe out, no change. All right, so the next one is hemoglobin levels, okay? And in a nutshell, it increases, okay? What is hemoglobin? Hemoglobin is the amount of hemoglobin brackets red blood cells, okay, in the bloodstream. You should remember that from year 11, hopefully. The role that hemoglobin plays in the body and in performance as well is that hemoglobin or red blood cells, they're interchangeable, so if you get a question on that, you can use one or the other, is that they are responsible for carrying oxygen to skeletal muscle around the body and removing byproducts from muscles away from the muscles back to leave the body. So the body adapts to aerobic training by increasing the amount of hemoglobin it produces in the bloodstream, so therefore it can carry more oxygen, therefore increasing your performance and delaying fatigue. Anaerobic training also has an effect on the amount of hemoglobin because the secondary role of hemoglobin or red blood cells is to remove byproducts, and we know that if you're working in your lactic acid system, you create byproducts such as lactate and hydrogen, so the hemoglobin levels in your bloodstream increases so that it can remove those byproducts more easily. So if we go back to my awesome picture before, so we've got our bloodstream here, we've got our blue capillaries, and we've got our bicep. We'd already talked about how the amount of capillaries can increase due to aerobic training, but the other thing that can increase is the amount of hemoglobin. So remember these dots were the red blood cells. So the other way that you can provide a steady stream of oxygen to working muscles is simply by making more red blood cells. And there are actually specific drugs you can take to increase the amount of red blood cells that your body produces, which is why it's banned in the Tour de France and just about every event in the world, because it's cheating. All right, all of a sudden you get superhuman performance when you shouldn't have. All right, because if you have more available oxygen in your body, well, guess what? You can just go and go and go without ever getting tired, and you're amazing, and you're cheating. All right, that's hemoglobin levels. So we've got 2 to go. Sorry. One thing. Same as when we talked about resting heart rate, stroke volume, and cardiac output before, you can see how they all get lumped together neatly, and you should talk about all of them together in a package. When you are talking about oxygen uptake, lung capacity, and hemoglobin levels, you should talk about all of them together in one paragraph instead of writing separate paragraphs, because they all have an effect on each other and they are affected by each other. All right, so our second last one we're looking at is muscular hypertrophy, okay? So in a nutshell, it increases, okay, with training, but it is a major development for anaerobic or strength training, and it does increase, but only slightly if you're focusing on aerobic training. So the definition of hypertrophy is the increase in size of skeletal tissue, okay? And it can occur two different ways. So it can occur as sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, which is the increase in the cell size, which will hold more glycogen and phosphocreatine. And the second way is that it can increase myofibrillar hypertrophy, which is the increase in the amount of fibers that you have in a skeletal muscle. Generally, this is the one that will change with aerobic training, and this is the one that will change with anaerobic or strength training, okay? So you look at like a good example to break this down is like, this is like a bodybuilder, and this would be like a gymnast. Both athletes, incredibly strong, okay? And in some cases, or actually not in some cases, in a lot of cases, the gymnast would actually be stronger than a bodybuilder. But this guy's massive and this guy's not, all right? Because they train different ways, all right? So if you're training above your anaerobic threshold, you're getting that burning sensation in your muscles, that will stimulate sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. And if you're just training like heavy strength type work without engaging like, you know, that sort of ATP-PC and lactic acid systems, then you're probably going to just be increasing your strength and hypertrophy via myofibrillar. So the way it would look under the microscope, so if I got a bicep and I cut it open, and this is what a normal bicep would look like. Sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, very simple. Those cells that make up, or the fibers within the bicep muscle, just get bigger, okay? So they're able to hold more glycogen, hold more ATP-PC, so that next time they have more immediate energy sources to push themselves harder, which is how the performance increases. Myofibrillar though, we've got more, okay, fibers now within our original bicep. So therefore it is able to basically work for a longer period of time before fatigue induces, simply because you've got more fibers to recruit. Either way, the muscle size increases, hence hypertrophy. Cool, one to go. So our last point here, and I'm going to try and set off to the side because I've got a white shirt on, is looking at the effect of fast and slow twitch muscle fibers from adaptations to training. So the first thing you need to understand is there are 3 muscle fiber types in all skeletal muscle in the body, okay? There is type 1, type 2A and type 2B. And yes, I could have wrote 2A and 2B, but they generally use Roman numerals for it, so that's what we're going with. So type 1 are slow twitch fibers, okay? They are very highly dense in capillaries. So if you imagine that picture I drew up before, they've got lots and lots of capillaries in them, okay? They are very, very good at delivering oxygen to the muscle, okay, and removing byproducts. So therefore, they are greatly suited to aerobic type athletes, okay? E.g. marathon runners, etc. Type 2A and 2B fibers are our anaerobic type fibers, okay? So type 2A is what we call red fast twitch, and type 2B is white fast twitch. They simply call that because underneath a microscope, one looks red and one looks white, okay? The red fast twitch ones are capillary limited, so they don't have many capillaries, but they do have some, okay? So it's not completely, you know, a no-go. It is best suited for anaerobic type training, and we're looking at more so like the lactic acid system, okay? So this is the one that would hold like glycogen, for example, to create ATP. And our last one, our type 2B fiber, is our white fast twitch fiber. It pretty much has little to no capillaries, like it may have one just to keep the cell alive, but other than that, it is all fiber for anaerobic work, and it simply holds our PC, phosphocreatine, so that we can use our ATP-PC stores. So hopefully you can see how the different fiber types in someone's body influences what activities they're good at, okay? Here's the kicker, and a lot of people don't understand this, and most lay people don't understand this point. Your fiber type is largely genetic, like it's 99% genetic. Whatever you are born with, fiber type wise, is what you have, okay? That is why all different shapes and sizes of people in the world exist. That's why when you look around the classroom, there are boys who are bigger, there are boys who are smaller, there are girls who are, you know, more muscly, there are girls who are less muscly, all right, etc. It is purely, mostly genetic, okay? Hence, not everyone can be an elite athlete. It doesn't matter how much you take a person and you train them at the AIS, they may and probably will never reach the level of like Usain Bolt, for example, okay? Because they simply don't have the amount of type 2B fibers in their body, and specifically their legs, okay? It's also, as like another way you could think about this, is that if somebody is genetically gifted and they have lots of either 1 fibers for endurance work or they have lots of 2 fibers for power work and they don't use it, well, that's such a waste and disappointing. So, training to increase, so while it's largely genetic, you can't just train to change your fiber types, okay? To a very minute degree you can, but it is that little that you don't comment about it in your answers, all right? So I can't just go and do a whole bunch of training and all of a sudden I'm going to go from all type 1 fibers to all type 2 fibers, all right? It doesn't work that way. But what we can do is that we can increase our capillary count, all right? So remember, if we're an aerobic training type, we can increase the capillaries through training adaptations to make them more efficient, or we can increase our cell size, so looking at hypertrophy for anaerobic work, so type 2A and 2B fibers, and therefore that is how we get our increased performance, all right? And just so you understand, like most people in the world, if we just go type 1 and type 2 as 2 different fiber types, you've got 1 here, type 2 here. Just to keep it consistent, I should write 2 in the Roman numerals. Right? Most individuals in the world are going to be about 60% this and 40% this. All right? Everybody in the world needs to do aerobic type stuff like walking around, etc., and sometimes you need to do some anaerobic type stuff, so you get 60-40 breakdown, okay? Elite marathon runners, for example, are like 75-25. So they have lots and lots of slow twitch fibers in their body, and therefore they're able to provide lots of oxygen to their working muscles with greater efficiency, and then they would train to increase their capillaries and the red blood cell count and all that other stuff to make them even better. And vice versa, like strength athletes are like the opposite spectrum. 75% type 2 fibers, like Usain Bolt kind of stuff, right? Lots of explosiveness, lots of power, lots of strength, but not very good at aerobic. And it's not because they're not fit or anything, it's just because of their fiber type, and that's how it breaks down. So that is our video on physiological adaptations in response to training. Thanks, bye.